Oh god, I don't remember any character names.
Right.
Oh, what's the magic called?
Allomancy.
Yeah, and then the other one's called Ferromancy. Did you read this?
No. We're rolling.
Oh.
You're gonna be awkward, aren't you?
Probably.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily, and today I've got a special guest.
Who?
You.
Oh. Hi everybody, I'm Adam. I'm the fiancé. A fiancé?
Well,
the one and
the
only.
only fiance I have. So today we are doing a video of Adam's favorite books.
Ooh.
So I read a lot, but Adam also reads a decent amount.
Not as much.
But I thought it'd be fun to bring him onto my channel so you can meet him and hear about some of the books that he would recommend. So you've got 5 books?
5 books, yep.
In any particular order?
In no particular order.
I thought you had a favorite though.
Yeah, but it'll switch, so I'm gonna do it in no particular order. And you can guess which one's my actual favorite. Ooh.
Oh wow, leave a comment
down
below. 5 books to share with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I have read none of them. One of them. One of them.
Oh, yeah.
So that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
I will be learning along with all of you.
Mm-hmm.
So without further ado, Adam's 5 favorite books.
So my favorite books get broken up into basically 2 categories. One is high fantasy, epic fantasy, and the other is historical fiction, which don't really mesh, but those are the categories. So this one falls into the high fantasy, epic fantasy, which is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and the whole Mistborn series. This one tells it's the beginning story, which I always like first books because it lays out the world and it gives you an introduction to all the characters. And so this one is following our characters Vin and Kel, and they are both allomancers. So what that means is they derive power from metals and alloys of those metals. So it's really interesting magic. It's kind of a more explained magic than you would find in Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or any of the other kind of magical, it seems like fantasy books out there. It has a much deeper background on what the magic is, but it's their journey to take down a repressive government kingdom. Yeah, everything Brandon Sanderson's really awesome.
Isn't the ruler just called Lord Ruler?
Lord Ruler.
I think that's really funny because it's a little repetitive in its
It's like
title.
Lord or Ruler.
Yeah.
Yeah. King.
Why did you like it?
So Brandon Sanderson is really good at having comedic elements as well as action adventure pieces, and I also like the kind of team building he does in this. It's kind of an Ocean's 11 type of bringing together a whole bunch of people who do different jobs to take down the Lord Ruler. And so I really like that because I like the Ocean's movies and other heisty type movies.
Is it a 5 out of 5 star book?
It's a 5 out of 5 star book.
Who should read Mistborn? Like, if you like these books, you should read it.
If you like high fantasy books, you'll really like it. So if you like books that they're going to go into some detail about the world, it's definitely lighter than
Game of Thrones?
Than a Game of Thrones. Yes, it's lighter than a Game of Thrones. It's lighter than a Lord of the Rings. So if you're looking to get into high fantasy or epic fantasy, Brandon Sanderson is a good way to get in there. So this is the second book on my list. This is People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks. This is a historical fiction book following a Jewish religious text called the Haggadah through multiple times in its existence. So it's a really ancient text, but then it follows it through periods of strife in the world. So it follows it through like kind of ancient times, ancient wars of peoples, and then it follows into more modern times of World War II, and it is in the war in Sarajevo, and it shows you the lives of the people who take care of the book or end up with the book and try to keep it safe. I like this book because it has ordinary people being put in extraordinary circumstances and seeing what their reactions are to those circumstances. And I think that's a thing that Geraldine Brooks does really well. And it's really cool to learn more about. I mean, historical fiction is always one of those weird things where you feel like you're learning, but you don't know actually how much is fiction and how much is history. So I felt like I learned a lot about these time periods, particularly around the war in Sarajevo. I didn't know a lot about it. I didn't learn a lot about it, but I felt like I learned more about this and then went on to learn more about it.
Who would you recommend it for?
If you are interested in if you like historical fiction around wartime, I think you would like this. It's not, because it's vignettes about different times, it doesn't have a huge character development of like one person, and there's no through line besides the book itself. But if you are a more plot driven person than a character development driven person, then I think you'd like this book. Excuse me. Here's the next of my favorite books, which is Snow Falling on Cedars by David Guterson. It is another historical fiction, and it follows the story of a man accused of murder on a small island off of the coast of Washington State, in Puget Sound. So the man accused of murder, Kabuo Miyamoto, is wrapped up in this kind of struggle on this island between the white residents and the Japanese immigrants. And this is 1954, so this is kind of after World War II and after the internment of Japanese Americans. And this man actually was interred, and then upon his release came back to the island off of Seattle. The whole trial of this man is underpinned by the kind of distrust for the Japanese Americans on this island. And the sheriff in this book does a really good job, or I don't want to say a really good job, but he kind of tries to fight against that narrative and look deeper into, or look past the distrust of certain island residents against the Japanese American people on the island. So this book is a really great mystery. It's a really good kind of whodunit type of story, as well as an interesting look at a small town community dealing with the racism and xenophobia of that time, and how they can, if they can get past that to retain that kind of small town cohesion, or whether this xenophobia kind of rips them apart and moves them to accuse and convict a innocent man.
Why did you like it?
I really liked it. For some reason, I'm drawn to stories of small towns. This one, as well as Olive Kittredge, is another book that I really liked.
I just recommended that in one of my recent videos.
So I didn't really grow up in a small town, but I think there's something about small town stories that I really like.
Maybe you're just trying to get to know me a little bit better and understand me.
If you didn't know, she grew up in the smallest town.
No.
An extremely small town.
And who do you recommend this book for?
I recommend this book for really anyone. It's really well written, it's really beautifully written. And I think if you like a mystery, but if you don't want a traditional mystery, an Agatha Christie, a Robert Galbraith type of mystery, you're looking for something that's a little more descriptive in its language. Less gory. I think this would be a book for you. The next book on my list is The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon. This book is another historical fiction combined with some action and escape and comic book things in it. It follows the story of two men who come to New York. One who trained in Houdini-esque escape, who escapes from Nazi-occupied Poland, and the other is a New Yorker living in New York.
Much more boring.
Yes, much more boring. But they get together, and at first they're working at kind of a amusements factory, so like a little like toys and doodads and doohickeys type of thing to amuse children. But then they start a comic book company. And they create characters somewhat based on themselves and somewhat based on the world, kind of the hubbub of New York around them, and some based on some potential romantic interests. And it's a really awesome book I really liked the kind of golden age of comics bit of this book. I was never really a comic book reader, but the comic book culture that has filtered down to me through kind of, I guess mostly through movies. Yeah, I've really enjoyed, and so seeing the kind of beginnings of the comic book culture was really cool, as well as you really get to know both Cavalier and Clay, and their journey to success in New York is kind of a very typical kind of American dream, hustle and bustle in New York type of story, which I really liked. And I read this book when I was working in Boston, and I read a lot of it on the T, the public transportation, going back and forth. So it felt really, I felt like I was part of that hustle and bustle, even though I wasn't really.
Who do you recommend it to?
I recommend it to people who like comic books but want something that is, I guess, a little more literary. Not saying that comic books aren't literary, but a full
This relies
novel.
only on words, not on
Correct.
pictures at all.
Because it still has some of that world of comic books and that fantasticism. Is that a word? Fantasticism?
Fantasy.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's
Fantasticality?
sure. The last book on my list is The Name of the Wind by, oh my god, I forgot his name. Patrick Rothfuss.
Start over.
The last book on my list is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, which is the first book of the Kingkiller Chronicles. And this book is another one kind of in the same style as Mistborn, the Brandon Sanderson book, another epic fantasy. Not as much world building, but again, epic fantasy, epic voyage through a fantastical world. And this story follows our main character, Kvoth, who is both telling the story and is the main character of the story. Is that a spoiler?
No. It's just like.
Well, it's not
you're
first person.
Well, it is.
It is, but it's told through the narrative device of he is telling his own story to others.
Right. So it starts in an inn. This is the one book I've read on this list. So it starts in an inn, and he is like posing as a shop or the innkeeper.
Yep.
And someone recognizes him, and he agrees to tell his story.
Right.
So as he begins to tell his story, it switches to first person.
But also, because he's telling his own story, he kind of prefaces it by he says he's not going to tell you everything, and he's not going to necessarily always be truthful. So you do have this piece of an unreliable narrator, which you don't know what of everything he's telling is
I forgot that.
is true, or what of it is exaggerated, or what is left out. So you can read it thinking that everything is true, but
I did that for sure.
but there are some parts where he might be doing it to paint himself in a better light or remove some obstacle that he had trouble with. But it's a really interesting book. It follows him from the time that he was a child growing up in kind of
Traveling.
traveling circus, traveling a bard. Kind of his families were kind of a gypsy lifestyle. But then it follows his life from there, and it's extremely interesting. And again, this has elements of magic. It has elements of
music,
which is really awesome. And these books are being developed into a mini-series, I believe, with Lin-Manuel Miranda, Emily's favorite human in the whole wide world, is working on writing the music. So that's cool. So I'd recommend this book to anyone who liked the Mistborn series or any other of Brandon Sanderson's books. Game of Thrones fans, I think, would also really like this kind of quest style of book.
So that's it. Those are Adam's 5 favorite books as of today.
Yep.
Could change. Alright, if you enjoyed this video and meeting Adam, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on my next video. But until then, happy reading.
Happy reading.
Bye.